I'm sitting in my parents' living room, my knees curled up on the edge of an old floral chair that's grown to the carpet over the last 20 years, while the walls were being reframed and the scent of wood was being ingrained into the fabric of the wallpaper, and I feel the same heaviness enveloping me that always comes over me when I come back here, to this house, where even the air seems frozen. The Christmas lights are twinkling in the windows, their soft glow reflected in the glass of the photographs. Graduations, vacations, family celebrations, my smile everywhere, always the same but never reaching my eyes, as if I were learning to portray happiness for someone else's album. The fireplace is crackling, but the warmth only reaches my skin, and inside me there's a cold, thick, sticky, alien, as if I've swallowed snow and it never melted. Juliet's squeal pierces the air as she tugs at the ribbon of gold paper and pulls out the treasure she's been dreaming about, her voice so loud, so commanding, as if the whole evening had been arranged just for this moment. "Mom, Dad, this is exactly what I wanted!" And I watch her fingers caress the cream Gucci bag as if it were a newborn baby, tenderness in every touch. The logo sparkles in the lights and she jumps with delight, and for a second, 26 turns into 16 in her eyes, the girl who always knew she'd get the best. Mom glows like a lamp. Dad nods with that satisfied expression I know so well. Only the best for our little one. You deserve it, princess. I carefully unwrap my gift, an envelope decorated with a snowflake sticker, my hands not yet shaking because I already know what's inside. They have it down to an art form. Inside is a $2 paper card, snow-capped mountains, and soulless printed text, not even bothering to write, "We love you," not even a check or a card, just empty. My face remains motionless and no one notices that something inside is crumbling, that 29 years of hope are breaking in this moment, like glass on tile. I catch Aunt Margaret's eye, her mouth slightly open, terror in her eyes. And before she can hide it, I already know. She sees. She knows. Dad looks at his watch, nervously tugging at the strap, as if to say that if we don't leave by 7, we'll get stuck in traffic. Dinner at the restaurant is more important than what's happening now. Mom, deftly avoiding my eyes, pours Juliet more eggnog, and she paces the room with her bag, holding it out to the lamplight. "Look at the shine on the leather. It goes with everything I own," she exclaims, and I feel my hands finally betray me, a slight tremor running through my fingers as I carefully fold the card and tuck it into my pocket, a souvenir of invisibility, a reminder that I was never here. This morning I stood in my small apartment in Portland, surrounded by cheap furniture and the smell of coffee, carefully wrapping gifts that I had chosen with such painstaking care as if my place in this family depended on it. My 57 grand teacher's salary barely stretches the line, loans, rent, bills, but I'd saved for months because I believed that this Christmas could be different. An Italian silk scarf for my mother that cost $180, wrapped in silver paper, the bow I'd tied 3 times until it fit perfectly. "She'll love this blue pattern," I whispered to myself, smoothing the edges. For Dad, a $145 Parker with his initials etched into the cap, which I imagined he'd hold up to meetings. For Juliet, a rare $120 book with a note about an art exhibit we'd promised to go to together, a promise she'd never remembered. "Maybe this Christmas will be different," I told myself in the mirror, applying mascara and trying not to smudge it with nervousness, hope simmering inside me like a stubborn weed that's survived decades of frost. And now I stood among them, smoothing my skirt and watching Juliet take a picture of the bag for Instagram. Dad pour himself more bourbon, Mom arrange cookies on a platter that had once belonged to Grandma. "I think I need some air," I said, my voice steady even though my chest was cracked. No one reacts except Aunt Margaret, who comes over and puts her hand on my shoulder, her fingers squeezing tightly as if sending a signal. "You're not wrong," she whispers. "You deserve so much more." I nod, fighting back tears, and grab my coat from the closet, the wool scratching my wrists as I slowly button it up to my throat. No one notices as I slip out of the house, leaving them at the holiday table. A deep silence follows me as I walk down the steps, up the slippery path to my car, dusted with snow. The 12 minutes to Council Crest Park fly by in a breath, and here I am, sitting behind the wheel, looking out at the lights of Portland spread out below me like 1,000 fallen stars. The city breathes to the rhythm of Christmas Eve, bustling, flashing shop lights and nervous horns, and it doesn't care that I sit alone in a snow-covered car on the top of a hill, like an exile, like a glitch in the system of alien traditions. When did I become so invisible to them? I hear this question louder than the music on the radio. It echoes in my chest and fogs up the windshield as if the car itself is crying with me. Unanswered questions, sticky and prickly, get stuck in my throat. I take the card out of my pocket. It's light. But in my hands, it feels like a leaden weight. Not just paper, but a symbol of a lifetime of dismissal. Proof that I have been deprived of the right to be a daughter. 29 years of hoping for an equal love compresses into a banal, happy holidays in typeface. And in that moment, the tears I've been holding back finally find their way, rolling in hot paths down cold cheeks, burning my skin and leaving an emptiness inside. I whisper to myself, like a prayer, that for 29 years I believed that something would change, that I could earn their warmth, and only now I see. No, never, under any circumstances. Through my tear-blurred eyes, the lights of the city below turn into watercolor smudges, blurry, like paintings that you can't look at directly because they're too painful. And I think, how many more people are sitting alone tonight, clutching proof that their families don't see them? How many more hearts are aching in the dark of cars, in kitchens without guests, in bedrooms where no one is waiting? Tell me, have you ever felt invisible to those who should see you most clearly? A month passes in dead silence. I call them rarely, briefly, formally, as if we were neighbors and not family, and only Aunt Margaret does not let me go. She calls more often than the others, checking if I am still breathing. One evening, Tuesday after work, I spread the photo albums out on the floor of the living room of my apartment, and the amber light of the January sun, breaking through the eternal gray curtain of Portland, fell on the yellowed pages, making them look like an excavation. Sandy Turner's archaeological dig, I whispered, running my finger over a photo from my 13th birthday, a supermarket cake. The icing slightly melted, the candles tilted, my smile looking forced, rehearsed. I put another picture next to it of Juliet's 16th birthday at the Benson Hotel, crystal chandeliers sparkling, a custom-made 3-tiered cake, Dad's arm around her shoulders, Mom adjusting the pearl necklace that gleamed like a knife in her memory. For the first time, I realized that all these years I'd been methodically documenting my own disappearance, collecting evidence as if I were preparing for a trial, only the judges never showed up. I kept the acceptance letter, too, a full scholarship to Portland State, but in the margins, Dad had written, "You'll have to work part-time to cover expenses." I keep it next to the card for Juliet's acceptance to fashion school. "We're so proud of you. Don't worry about anything but school." My fingers shake as I look through the pictures from my graduation. Mom and Dad arriving 20 minutes before the ceremony was over, Dad checking his watch and apologizing, "Sorry we're late. Juliet has a fashion show." And Mom leaning over, smearing lipstick on my cheek and whispering, "So when are you going to start looking for a job?" The floor around me is an archaeological pile of evidence, a civilization built on imbalance. I open a drawer and pull out an old leather-bound ledger, columns of numbers, neat lines of my self-sufficiency, student loan statements, $24,800, despite working 20 hours a week at a bookstore for $12 an hour. Next to it, a printout of an email from my dad. "Unfortunately, we are unable to help you with your deposit at this time." And in contrast, a newspaper clipping about Juliet's fashion school, $38,000 a year, plus $20,000 for Milan, paid for by her parents. The numbers flash before my eyes like neon signs of accusations, and I feel them burning into my chest. My rent is $1,200 for a tiny apartment with shuddering heating and mold in the corners, and Juliet's post pops up on my phone. New apartment in the center, blessed with family support, $2,800 a month, and she writes that she is grateful for the love and care. My phone vibrates. I ignore it and look down at the stack of birthday cards. My mother's handwriting changes from year to year, but the same abbreviation is always there. Sandy. Nothing else. I pull my journal off the nightstand, put the Christmas card in there, like an heirloom, and slowly, in measured letters, write at the bottom, 1. Last time, I will beg for love. My phone vibrates again. The family group chat pulses with new notifications. I open the settings and mute it with a single swipe. Done. Another message from my mother appears on the screen. Casual dinner on Sunday. Your dad is grilling steaks. I look at the text and slowly begin to type a reply. Sorry, I have plans. My fingers type the words without shaking, and for the first time I feel inside, without the usual heat of excuses, without the pathetic need to leave the door ajar. Just a short answer, no complicated explanations, no promises to reschedule, and I can almost hear that silence that always terrifies my mother, because it doesn't give her the control she's used to. Juliet calls next. Her voice in the message is casual, as if this whole winter hadn't happened. Sandy, can you help me move into a new place next weekend? Mom and Dad are busy with some financial matters, and I hang over the screen for a second, as if my body remembers the automatic script, rearranging my schedule, dropping things, showing up with coffee and donuts, spending hours assembling IKEA furniture while she watches from the sidelines with the air of a queen. But now I see that this woman is no longer me. I'm unavailable, I type, and the air clears, like a thunderstorm. Good luck with the move. I watch the 3 dots appear and disappear and return again, like a pulse of her irritation. And finally, a question flashes across the screen. What's wrong with you lately? I take a deep breath, feel my lungs fill with air, and type what may be the most honest message of my life. I need some time away from family gatherings. The answer comes immediately. All the confidence she has in her mother's right to decide how I feel. Mom will be upset. I put the phone face down. Don't answer. Don't make excuses. This time it's not my responsibility, and there's a strange release in that, like the first breath after being underwater for a long time. In the bathroom, I stand in front of the mirror and study my reflection. The same brown eyes, the same straight nose, the same person who for 29 years held on to hope as if it were a rope leading upward, although all that time it had only strangled me. When does hope become self-destruction? I ask my reflection, and it is silent. Only the lamp above the mirror hums, as if mockingly. I return to my journal and write there a question that cuts to the bone. What would I tell my students if they were treated the same way? And the answer comes with such clarity that I freeze for a moment, because it is simple, obvious, and requires no conventions. I would tell them that they deserve respect. I would tell them that love should not require endless proof of its own worth. I would tell them that sometimes the family into which we are born is unable to see us completely. I close the albums, put away the ledger with the numbers, put everything in one box and mentally label it evidence. To remember that this is not fiction or a whim, that everything that happens is not the result of my oversensitivity, but a pattern that has crossed me out time and time again. For the first time, I allow myself to see this pattern clearly, without embellishment and hope. When did you realize that the painful pattern of life needed to be changed? I write another line in the diary and feel how something inside begins to rebuild. 6 weeks later, I'm already in a new job, and for the first time in years, I'm completely focused only on myself. The sun pours through the windows of the pottery workshop, where I sit at the wheel on Saturdays, my fingers sinking into the cool clay, and from the shapeless gray mass under my hands, something beautiful, new, alive, is born. 6 weeks in a row I come here, and on the kitchen calendar there is a check for $250 for the course pinned to a magnet. Next to it is written, "Invest in yourself." The instructor, Miranda, a woman with silver hair that falls in her face, leans toward me and says, "You have a natural instinct, Sandy. Most beginners struggle with the clay, but you are learning to cooperate with it." And I smile because I know this metaphor is painfully familiar to me. For 29 years, I have been struggling with the image of my family instead of building something new with what I have. "Thank you," I say, pressing lightly on the edge to mold the lump of clay into a serving bowl, trying to be more patient not only with the material, but with myself. Dr. Dot Williams' words from our last session come to mind. Your worth is not measured by their recognition. $90 an hour, money that used to fly away on gifts carefully chosen for people who never even noticed, is now changing my internal landscape. I took the last family photograph down from the wall last night, and in its place are 3 local paintings of lonely trees against a stormy sky, more honest to me than any framed portrait. My bookshelf has changed too, from the classics my father insisted on so we would seem cultured to books I chose myself. My phone vibrates. My mother's name is on the screen, and her message once again seems to be trying to recapture the old dynamic. "Sandy, darling, I thought you should host Easter dinner this year. Juliet is so busy with her new project, and it would give you a chance to show off your culinary skills." Even the ellipsis in her voice carries the familiar weight of judgment, the implication that if I refuse, I will be a bad daughter. 3 months ago, I would have happily agreed to prove my worth again with perfectly poached eggs and a spotlessly clean apartment. But today, I lower my clay hands, pick up my phone, and type, "I can't host Easter dinner this year." I have a prior commitment. No explanation, no apology, just a boundary, clear and firm, like the line between wet clay and a dry table. Miranda narrowed her eyes, cocked her head to one side, and looked at my awkward clay bull, and said with that soft confidence that seemed to burn through the air, "You're finding your center." I felt she was right, not just about the lump of clay on the spinning wheel, but about me, who had finally stopped crumbling and started to come together. And as if the universe had decided to play along, on Monday morning, Principal Harrington called me into his office, where instead of the usual stern crease on his forehead, there was a rare smile. "Sandy, this is outstanding work," he said, handing over a folder of my students' reviews. I flipped through the neatly written pages, and one confession particularly struck me. Miss Turner's assignment to tell our lives from the perspective of the hero, not the victim, changed the way I see myself. The words hit me like a hot stone, warming a place where there had been a void for years. Before I could take a deep breath, Harrington added, "We need a summer writing program director. Your free spirit is exactly what we need." And in his voice, the word independent didn't sound like an insult, as my mother liked to hurl at me, but like a sign of respect, like an acknowledgement. I straightened my back and replied, "It would be an honor." That same day, another email arrived, an invitation to speak at a teachers' conference. My first instinct was to click delete, because my inner critic immediately whispered that the recipient must have made a mistake. But Dr. Williams' words echoed in my mind, "Assume you deserve good things until proven otherwise." I took a deep breath and clicked accept. Later that evening, sitting in the dark kitchen, I transferred $500 to a new account, calling it down payment on a house that would one day be mine alone, without borrowed space or the feeling of being a temporary tenant in my own life. The night brought a call, and Juliet burst into tears. "He left me, Sandy. I can't stand it. Come right now." In the past, I would have broken down, pulled on the first coat I could find, and rushed through the fog just to console her. But now I took a breath and said evenly, "I'm so sorry this happened. I can talk tomorrow at lunchtime." There was a long pause in which I could almost hear her idea of me crumbling. "What? I need you now. This is serious," she choked, and I answered, "I understand your pain, Juliet. But I'm only free tomorrow at noon. My time matters, too." The silence was so heavy that it rang in my ears, and then her voice softened. "Then, I'll wait until tomorrow." "I'm sorry, Sandy." I heard those words for the first time. I didn't notice how the phone fell from my hand and the dawn was gathering outside the window. I half expected the next call, from my mother, with accusations of my selfishness. And I was right. At 1:37 a.m., her voice poured into my voicemail with familiar reproaches. I deleted the message without even listening to the end. In the following weeks, the circles of my life began to widen, like a stone thrown into water. Robert, the history teacher from the next room, came over after the call and, fiddling with a paper clip, murmured, "Would you like to have dinner on Friday?" Just as friends. I've always admired your devotion to your children. That same month, Aunt Margaret arrived and, as she carefully laid out Grandma's patchwork quilt on my bed, said, "She always saw your light, Sandy, even when others closed their eyes." At the pottery studio, my new friends invited me to hike Mount Hood, and in therapy, Dr. Williams noted that my posture had changed. My shoulders had opened up, as if I were reaching for the sun. At a faculty meeting, when the athletic director again dismissed my idea of introducing writing into the physical education curriculum, my colleague Sandra unexpectedly took my side. "Sandy has been talking about this for years, and the research supports it." An invitation to Cousin Caleb's wedding surfaced in a family email, and I wrote briefly, "I will, but I will go separately." A few minutes later, a personal message arrived from my mother. "Why are you being so stubborn?" I spent a long time choosing my words, and then I wrote them down honestly. Setting boundaries doesn't mean being difficult. My calendar already had written in red pen, "Wedding, no longer than 2 hours." Robert is with me. My balcony garden, where the evening wind now rustles among the grasses and wildflowers, has become my little fortress. I sit among the greenery with an open diary and realize that on its pages there are fewer complaints and questions, more and more clear statements. Today I write, "To grow, you need both space and nourishment." The ink falls with a heavy stroke, my fingers still smelling of clay, write out a new truth. What seeds of self-respect are you willing to sow? I look up and see a bee circling above the flowers, not asking for permission or apologizing, but simply living. And the answer blossoms in me, bright, confident, like never before. In a few months, I will show my family who I have become. And on our wedding day, 3 months later, I step out of the car with Robert, smooth my sage green dress, and take the first step into a new chapter of my life. The simple knee-length silk dress I had bought after counting and rewriting my budget on scraps of paper hung on me as if it knew the value of every dollar I had set aside for it. Robert leaned toward me, his hand barely touching my back, and whispered with the warmth that always melts my ice, "You look terrific." The ostentatious country club spread out before us, with its manicured lawns, every blade of grass trimmed to a straight edge, and Mount Hood shining in the distance, as if nature itself had decided to remind us who was the real boss here. Caleb had certainly picked a beautiful location, although I couldn't understand how Uncle George could have paid for all this with only his modest hardware store. "Ready?" Robert asked quietly. I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, my consent was genuine, not forced. 6 months of self-improvement, conversations with Dr. Williams, and painful lessons about boundaries had made me more resilient than ever. Juliet called out to me as I entered the hall, waving her hand wildly, as if I could walk past and pretend not to notice her. Her dress shimmered, sparkling in the sunlight, and seemed too formal for a garden wedding. But this was Juliet. She always had a little more gloss than appropriateness. "Sandy, you finally came," she said, kissing the air near my cheek, leaving behind a cloud of perfume that made me want to cough. Her gaze slid to Robert. "Who's this?" "Robert Thompson," he said, holding out his hand, "Sandy's colleague." "And one more thing," I added, looking straight into her eyes. "We've been dating for 3 months." Juliet's eyebrows shot up as if I'd just given her a difficult algebra problem. "That's odd. Mom didn't say anything." "Mom doesn't know everything anymore," I answered guardedly. And then she appeared, Mother. Her smile was strained, like an overstretched elastic band ready to snap. Her eyes swept over me, over the modest gold necklace around my neck, over my dress, over Robert beside me, and there was a cold calculation in those glances. "Sandy, dear." Her embrace was wooden, formal. "Your apartment must be jammed with guests by now. Have you thought about moving?" The old familiar stab of pain rose in my throat, but I breathed evenly, as Dr. Williams had taught me. "My apartment suits me perfectly." Dad came up behind me, fiddling with his collar, his suit hanging looser on him than I was used to. "There's my independent girl," he muttered, patting me on the shoulder as if we were colleagues rather than father and daughter. "Your apartment must be too small." Same play, different actors. I smiled without saying anything. Aunt Margaret saved me. She threw herself into my arms, smelling of vanilla cream, and whispered, "You're simply glowing." Then she pulled back, glanced over her shoulder, and added more quietly, "Your parents are having money problems." Thomas lost his investment. The ceremony passed like a dream in a white haze of tulle, promises, and fake smiles. At the reception, I suddenly noticed things that would have escaped me before. Dad growling at the photographer about paying, Mom holding not Prada but a worn clutch with a frayed corner, and Juliet's face stretched into a grimace of panic when the bartender handed her credit card back with a denial. I went out into the garden. Roses climbed the trellises. Their smell was thick as wine, and I counted to 10, breathing in the aroma, trying not to react. Turning around, I saw Juliet with smudged mascara. I fixed her eyeliner, and she sat heavily on the stone bench next to me. "You've changed," she breathed. Yes, I realized how unfair it all was, and suddenly, "I'm sorry, Sandy." I expected a catch, because her apologies are rarely unconditional, and it was true. We can't pay for everything anymore. Dad's business is collapsing. The apartment is being sold. The cards are empty. I sat down next to her, but left some distance. "That sounds hard," she sobbed. "I never learned to stand on my own like you. I don't know how to live on what I earn myself." The sunset illuminated her dress with an amber light. The glitter sparkled, and we sat in silence. The first time in decades that there was a silence between us without hostility. Later, Dad intercepted me at the cake. "You've always been good with money." His voice sounded unusually uncertain. "Teachers are great at planning for retirement. We might need some advice. Family should help family, right?" I took a sip of champagne and said nothing. Relatives flocked like wasps to dessert. "Sandy, are you the head of the department now?" Uncle George thundered. "Always knew you'd make it." Mom crept up, fiddling with the ring on her finger. "Sandy's always been our rock." Robert was across the room talking to his sister, and I could hear the pride in his voice as he said my name. Juliet came over again, quieter than usual. "Do you happen to know of any cheap apartments in Portland? Maybe with roommates." The irony pricked me. After all the years when I was a nobody to them, suddenly everyone wanted me to give something. Even Dad had hinted later about temporary financial support. I answered bluntly, "I can't help. My budget is set for my needs." But I offered Juliet what I could. Start with the budget and finding roommates. That's how I survived the first 3 years. She nodded without arguing. Mom pressed. "We've always supported you." I asked quietly, "Emotionally or materially?" Her silence was more honest than any words. At 9, I found Robert at the bar. "Ready to go?" I asked. His relief matched mine. "Any time." We left during the bouquet toss, turning not toward Portland but toward the ocean. Cannon Beach greeted us with a salty wind, and we walked barefoot across the sand, shoes in our hands. "You did brilliantly," Robert said. I watched the moonlight spread across the water, sometimes the greatest. A gift is not a shiny package with a bow, but a knowledge as heavy as wet stone. To see everything clearly, without embellishment, without the rose-colored glasses I'd been stuffed with for years. The waves crash on the shore and return, their eternal rhythm louder than all the family legends invented to cover up the cracks. I stand on the wet sand and wonder how many others like me in this world have found the strength to shed the expectations that stifle them, and instead choose a path that is uncertain, shaky, but real, and has self-respect. The ocean doesn't answer me, and strangely enough, I don't need it to answer. For the first time in years, I feel like I know the answer. A week after my wedding, I start the engine of my old Honda, set the timer for 2 hours, and drive to my parents' house. I park next to my dad's Lexus, the fenders of which have rusted away the varnish, and the sight seems symbolic. Everything that seemed indestructible is also collapsing. The porch light flickers, as if to warn me, "Be careful, everything is the same here." There is no wreath on the door, no holiday gloss, but the air is filled with the same heavy mixture of expectation and pretense. I knock on the door, don't have my key out, and Mom appears with a smile that's too bright, too sticky. "Sandy, you look great. That promotion suits you," she says, her arms tight as handcuffs. I walk into the living room and immediately notice the furniture has been moved, the leather sectional sofa gone, replaced by a plain beige one, as boring as the motel one. The crystal vase on the coffee table is gone, but the photographs still hang on the walls, like witnesses to a past in which I always stood in the shadows. Dad rises from his chair, his back hunched, his face tired. "You're punctual, Sandy," he says. "I have a meeting tomorrow, so I only have until 8, I reply. Juliet is sitting in the corner, her fingers fiddling with her knees, nodding but saying nothing, which is odd because the silent Juliet is almost a myth. Mom bursts in with a tray, cups clanking. "I made your favorite lemon cookies because family is supposed to stick together, especially in tough times." Dad starts pacing in front of the fireplace where the wood hasn't caught, and his voice sounds strained, like he's trying to mend a crumbling facade. The Turner name has always meant something in this community. Mom sits down next to me, puts her hand on my arm. "We're proud of you, Sandy. Your independence, your determination, your reward. You've always made do with little." Each word is a stinging pierce through my skin. The same play, different costumes. I sip my coffee in silence, waiting for them to get to the point. "The market crashed," Dad breathes, as if admitting infidelity. "Our investment went up in smoke." "The bank is calling on the mortgage," Mom whispers. "We could lose the house." Dad clears his throat. "And Juliet's rent went up. That complex has raised its rates again." Mom squeezes my hand. "We know you got a promotion now, a position in the department. That's a great salary. It all fits together like a puzzle, and I realize this is what this show is all about." I put my cup down on the table and hear the china clink. "We were wondering if you could help with Juliet's expenses for a while," Dad says. The word temporarily stretches out like gum, and I can see that no one in the room believes it. "Family helps family," Mom adds, her smile trembling. "You've always been our rock." The room goes quiet as before a storm. Juliet looks at her nails and blushes. And then I do something I've been putting off for a long time. I take a Christmas card out of my purse. The edges are already frayed. I put it on the table. I carried it with me. "You know why?" "Because it's true," Dad snorts. "A card? Seriously, Sandy? We're talking about money here." I run my finger down the paper. "This isn't about money. This is about 29 years of messages you've sent me. I'm talking about my 13th birthday with the store-bought cake, the letter Dad sent me to work through college while Juliet went on a family vacation to Italy. Every date I got crumbs, and she got a feast." My mother's face turns chalky. We didn't know. We didn't do it on purpose. But it happened all the time," I continue, feeling the power boiling up inside me. Every holiday, every step I took, I was your backup shadow. Dad blushes. We gave you everything you needed. Everything except what I wanted, Juliet suddenly interjects, her voice shaking. Everyone turns to look at her. She's right. We've always put her below me. I knew it, and I took advantage. Dad opens his mouth, but there are no words. The family mythology is crumbling right here, before my eyes. I say calmly, this isn't about punishment, but if you want a relationship, it has to be one of respect and equality. So you won't help your sister? Mom cries, and for the first time, her tears are real, not calculated for effect. I won't be the solution to your financial woes while this continues, I say. I won't pay Juliet's rent when I can barely afford my own. I won't let this game of giving everything away and being left with nothing repeat itself. After everything we've done for you, Dad's voice breaks, anger rising to the surface. Is this how you repay me? I answer evenly. I'm offering you better than money. I'm offering you the truth, a chance to build a relationship based on respect, not debt. Juliet quietly adds, she doesn't owe us anything. It's not her responsibility. The silence that followed hung between us like a thick cloud, so thick I could hear my own heart beating in my chest, and for the first time in decades, this silence felt honest, unvarnished, without the usual family lines that always papered over the cracks. I slowly rose from the couch, smoothed my skirt with my hands, as if erasing invisible stains of the past from the fabric, and said quietly but firmly, I need recognition. I want you to see what really happened. The words sounded like a sentence, and at the same time like a release. I added, I need boundaries that are respected, not crossed, as if they never existed. I exhaled and, in a different, calmer voice, said that I was willing to help Juliet find a simpler apartment, to create a budget for her, to show her how to work and build a life without handouts, but I would no longer sacrifice my own financial security and self-respect on the altar of family expectations. My mother's shoulders shook. Her sobs were silent, but so real that for the first time in my life I believed she, too, bore her pain. My father turned to the window, his back like a stone wall, tense, clenched with pride that did not allow him to admit his own weakness. Just think about what I said, I exhaled, grabbed my purse, and went to the door. The night air hit me in a fresh gust, like ice water, and I walked to my Honda on the gravel, listening to the crunch of what had once been the foundation of my childhood under my feet. I looked up. The stars were twinkling above the house, and they seemed to be witnesses to these words, finally spoken out loud. As I started the engine, I found myself thinking, the truth doesn't have to sound harsh to be powerful. It just needs to be spoken, and it will change the world around you. What truth did you need to tell? I whispered to myself, and the answer came from deep within, from the part of me that I had kept silent for so many years. I remember turning the key in my new apartment a year later in Portland, and the click sounded like a hymn to freedom. I was holding the last box of books that Robert had brought in, and his simple last box sounded like a promise that from now on, everything would be different. His quiet but constant presence in my life was an unexpected comfort, not a salvation, not a crutch, but a true partnership without demands and debts. I hung a frame with the house key on the wall, under which I attached a small sign, $18,000 is the price of freedom. Each of those numbers smelled of nights of overtime, of strict budgets, of the refusals I had used to carve out expectations. Aunt Margaret came into the living room with wildflowers in a ceramic vase I had made and said, "You look good being a department chair." She put her hand on my shoulder, her eyes shining with pride, and I felt that at last someone saw me without comparison. The afternoon sun played on the table where I laid out the golden rectangles of place cards for dinner. This time, not a lavish family gathering, but a small circle. Robert, Aunt Margaret, and Juliet. At this table, my rules applied. respect, space, boundaries. In the morning, a text came from Dad. I hope the move went well. 5 words, and in them I could sense his struggle, his attempt to adjust to a new reality. Mom called every week now. Her conversation became cautious, as if she were learning to talk to her daughter again after so many years of not hearing from her. Small steps, but they could lead to real intimacy. Juliet appeared with a potted green plant and a bottle of inexpensive wine, and her designer bags were gone, and she was dressed in practical clothes for work, her first real job. "The apartment hunt is going well," she said, helping to set out the plates. "My neighbor works in accounting. She's teaching me how to budget." And there was a modesty in her voice that I had never heard from her before. Later, when Robert was holding a drill, screwing in a rod for new curtains, he asked, "Have you thought about next summer?" "The cabin on Mount Hood is still for rent." I smiled, not fearing the future. "I'd like to," I said simply, and the words carried a lightness in them. When the guests left, I was left in the silence of my new apartment. I pulled out the same $2 Christmas card that had once made me invisible, framed it, and set it on the table. It was now a symbol of the strength born from pain. I opened my journal, ran my hand across a blank page, and wrote, "Worth is ours, not someone else's words." I thought of the young teacher at school who cried after an assembly where her accomplishments were devalued. I handed her a napkin and said, "Your boundaries are not selfishness," the very words I had once longed for. My savings account now held the future, not emergency fund. A pottery studio invited me to exhibit my work, and I stood on the balcony watching the sunset paint the Portland sky a watercolor. A year ago, I sat in my car, crying over a card that seemed proof of my invisibility. Today I stood in the midst of a life built on my own terms. I quietly whispered into the evening air, "The gift I have chosen is myself." I closed my journal, knowing I no longer needed external validation. I turned off the porch light and walked into a house filled with things I had chosen with love for myself. And suddenly it became clear, love that must be earned is no love at all.